This is Ed Robinson of Kensington College, continuing the series of Excel VBA, and indeed considering date and time from the first video. We'll look at initializing dates, separating date components, assembling the date components, and then combining all the above operations. We'll consider initializing a date using date delimiters and date value, and we'll see the difference. So let's start off by just dimming a date, declaring a date variable, and then we can use the date value function so that date value, and then we might as well just message box out that value to see that it works. Okay, so that gives that. Now, another way you might consider initializing a date is by using date delimiters like this. Well, watch carefully as I press the enter key. This is rather strange. Watching, ready, go. It changes the date around. It thinks it's not quite sure really. It thinks it's maybe an American format, which is the 30 is too big, so it put it as a day in American format. So I strongly recommend that you don't actually use date delimiters, the hash signs on either side, and use the date value. Now this date value is actually very forgiving. For example, if I try this and I can move this here, perhaps I can even misspell October if you'd like to. I can actually reduce this and see if it still works, and yes, you see, so it is quite forgiving. If we didn't have the year on it, it thinks it's the current year and will which in this case is 2017. So it would be a good idea to get some help on the date value just by highlighting the date value and pressing the F1, and you can see that the date value help comes up, and you can just take a look at that and get some more ideas on using date value. So we'll consider now separating date components. We've already seen how we can message box just the date corresponding to today's date, which is the 3rd of November, and then if we take out the year part of that, we're more or less parsing the date, if you like. The year being 2017, the month being the 11th month, and the day being the third day of the month. Similarly, we can separate time components. We've already seen the time. If I just run that, you'll see that that's the given time, and the hour, which is the 18 at 6 p.m. 56 minutes past, and the seconds is 25. A useful generic function which can actually replace all of these is the date part. Now you can press F1 and date part and get help on that, which is fairly necessary, because if you take a look at the settings here, by the way, we can use in there, we could use date, time, but I'll generalize it and use now, and then from the help you can see that if we use the setting, it gives you, that should give us the year. So that has the corresponding function to this year function here. The other ones we've got, for example, we've got the month, the 11th, the day, but an interesting one is the hours, because that's a generic version of this one here. So if I try that, you see it gives me the 19th at 7 p.m. And you can have seconds, and it's interesting there that minutes is actually n, so you don't get confused with the month. We've seen how to separate the date components. Now let's talk about assembling the date components. So for example, we have the date serial, which is used quite a bit to put the dates together, glue them together if you like. So we take the year followed by the month followed by the day of the month, and we assemble those, which obviously is the 1st of December. We also have the time serial, which will produce a time. It's the 1 hour, 2 minutes and 3 seconds. So we talked about date serial and how the date is assembled. We now wish to consider how we can combine these operations, pulling the dates to pieces and putting them back together again. Let's just I'll just tell you that the current date is this date, and we might have a task here to find the date of the first, to use the date of the first day of this month. We could do that by replacing the date and the year in date serial by the current year and the current month, and then indicate that we want the date of the first of that month, which indeed is the 1st of the 11th, 2017, which we might want to use in a further calculation. Let's consider now adding and subtracting dates. So, for example, if the current date is 3rd of November, date value now plus 1, that means just remember that the date is considered as an integer part, the number of days in the century, so if you add a 1 to it, we should get tomorrow. In this case, we've got the date add function, where we're going to add 1 week to today's date. So let's see how that works. You see, tomorrow's date is the 4th of the 11th, and a date in a week's time is the 10th. It's a good idea to take a look at the help on the date add function, and you can see that you can add units of days, weeks, hours, and so on. To find the difference between two dates, we could simply subtract the two date values. Remember that this will give us integer values, so that when we subtract them, it should just give the number of days in between those two dates. But if we want to be, we could do exactly the same thing by using the date diff function. And if we try that, that should give exactly the same result. There's 1 day in between those two, but we've specified the number of days in between. If you take a look at the help on that, double click on this and press the F1 key, and it comes up with the help on the date diff. You see, you could find the number of weeks between two intervals by using the WW and so on. So it would be a good idea to take a look at that help and just try out a few of those parameters as well.